Discussion with the pathless path, or better known as Jer.
We kind of blocking him a little bit, maybe.
Oh shit! This is take two, because the last time I actually blocked out Jer's face entirely by sitting right in front.
I didn't even notice. It didn't look bad, but I guess from the other camera it was...
Yeah, you're looking at it from a different view. So I was looking at that view too, and it actually...
He's got like an upskirt shot of us right now.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm so sneaky.
Take a picture with my cell phone.
Oh no.
Actually, let me full screen you here. Bam. All right.
Here we go.
Now we're looking good.
Cool.
Okay. So, yeah, we discussed quite a bit in our first try. We talked a bit about science and how it relates to a spiritual worldview, whether or not there's a conflict there. I think we all agree that there's not a conflict. It's just a question of how exactly we justify this compatibility that we see between science and spirituality. So I guess maybe, Jared, you could give us your take on how you try to hold these two, the scientific method and the spiritual path, say, together into some larger whole.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess the main thing that I brought up in the last take was developmental logic, and sort of seeing different types of spirituality according to our own cognitive and our own development of consciousness. So there's a supernatural take on religion that scientists often critique religion for, as it being unscientific. The literal, God made the earth in 6 days sort of thing. I mean, from a scientific viewpoint, that's pretty false, obviously. But there are subtler and, I guess you could say, in a way, more abstract dimensions of religion that are, I guess, more transcendent and compatible with the physical sciences. So, yeah, developmental logic and an evolution of religion is a good way to put it, and it kind of leaves the supernatural aspect in a particular point in this greater picture of what spirituality is. Right. So I guess let's start there.
Okay.
Good place to start.
Yeah, so I guess the idea is then to be able to not only conceive of but relate to the natural world in such a way that, while not being supernatural, is also not reductionistic, or because it seems like those scientifically minded people, or I would almost say materialists, who think that science is definitely incompatible with religion or spirituality, or whatever you want to call it, they'll look at nature as a machine. It's basically atoms, or if not atoms, then it's ultimately every larger whole is reducible to its parts, and that you can understand every system.
Reductionism.
Right. So how can we incorporate the scientific method in such a way that it allows us to understand nature as full of emergent wholes at different levels that have their own sorts of agency?
Basically, Jared, does a scientific worldview equal? Is it equal to reductionism, or can science be compatible with another type of ism? And if that's true, what is it? What's your take on it? On that kind of those wavelengths, those conflicting wavelengths.
Okay. Well, I think science isn't stuck in a particular viewpoint. I think it's more if there's a perspective that scientists contemporarily hold, that changes. So I think science is a lot like religion, in the fact that if you're at a different structure of different perception of thinking, the system, such as science or religion, will change and become more encompassing or less encompassing. So I think science can evolve just like religion does, in a way, if you know what I mean.
Yep. Right.
So
there's a lot of momentum now in the scientific community to try to educate the public about science and sort of combat this supernaturalism that's sort of really deeply ingrained in at least the American culture.
Hmm.
I know I'm very supportive of that effort, and you know the names that are involved are you know Dawkins, Hitchens, Harris, P.Z. Myers. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
A lot of these names are popular. They're popular for criticizing a particular meme or underlying current of religion.
Right.
That's not necessarily the whole of religion, though. So I was wondering if you could speak about, have you noticed this? It seems like an easy thing to do. It's like you're picking on in the weak-minded part in our culture, in our collective psyche, that seems to be a part of us that's not necessarily going away, but it's very easy to look at it from an objective, rational point and just say, that's fucking bats.
Total
wild.
nonsense.
Yes. And it just seems like we all have, some of us, once we have access to this rational type of thinking, have these criticisms come up in our psyche or in our conceptual domain, and it just seems some of the things that religion does, not religion, but this fundamentalist, conformist type of meme that seems to go through religion, just like other memes.
Right. And it's very anti-scientific.
That's right. It's very conserving, right? It conserves to the past, which is, in a sense, before this real scientific, rational view came, because it's new and it's scary, and it's not really making room for my worldview. So I'm just going to condemn it because my book or my family or my group said to.
So Jared, what's your perspective on that sort of battle that goes on between the scientists who are very vocal in public about denouncing religion in all its forms? Do you sort of get frustrated with that dialogue, or do you tend to side more with the atheists, or do you think that there's something that's not being said in these usual discussions?
It's definitely something missing. And for the most part, it seems like it's just a clash of worldviews, because the way the more scientific-oriented folks do, like P.Z. Myers, they kind of just really knock at religion and just kind of cut it down, and they reduce it actually, to the supernatural components without acknowledging any kind of deeper spiritual dimension. And on the other hand, though, the religious folk tend not to really express that subtler dimension. They're much more literal thinking, so they're kind of just butting heads constantly, and there's no real leeway going on. So I guess the missing element is sort of the way, I guess, to see it from an evolutionary perspective. If you look at the way we kind of developed out of literal thinking, at least in Europe with Christianity, it sort of began with the mental rational age.
That's right.
And basically it started as a healthier form, like religion reflecting and beginning to question itself. So I think maybe if the more rationalist-oriented folk started to just leave questions from the religious folk, like, all right, does this really make that much sense? Maybe they would get more headway, maybe not. And then on the other end, if more literal thinking people started to begin to question and start to embrace rationality, maybe there'd be progress. I know there's this book I saw in Barnes & Noble. I think it's called Thank God for Evolution.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like, I was very happy to see that book. So I was like, oh, finally, some kind of progress.
Yes.
Right.
But I think something like that, sort of a middle way between the two to help, I guess, bridge the communication gap.
So I hear you're talking here about like the evolution of consciousness, and a lot of times, at least in the more rationalist, scientifically oriented circles, evolution is a biological phenomenon. They may not necessarily have much to tell us about human culture.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Richard Dawkins has his mimetic theory of evolution, which is his attempt to account for the evolution of consciousness or culture in the same sort of a way that Darwin's mechanism works on biology. I don't think that the meme theory, though it seems to get some of what happens when culture is sort of transmitted, it doesn't seem to get all of it. Do you think that there's an element to cultural evolution that transcends the Darwinian evolution?
Certainly. And the last week we were also talking about a holistic sort of theory of the universe.
Right.
And what we were saying was the universe is sort of made up of higher and lower orders that are observable, and they can't be reduced to the former. Just like you can't really talk about chemistry when you're talking about, quantum physics. I mean, you can, but the language of chemistry, and such as, the periodic table, is necessary. Mm-hmm. And in the same sense, social sciences are kind of necessary, and the language we use are necessary to understand. So I don't necessarily think that the mechanics of social evolution can be equal to the mechanics of Darwinianism. There's new processes, there's new elements to it.
Right.
It's similar structurally. I would give them that because, if there's evolution of biology and sociology, then yeah.